the one standing between you and the final fika. So I will do my best to wrap up in a nice mode. And so yeah, this is early results of what we are doing on the time model, the test automation improvement model, which is essentially, well, let me ask you, how many of you bought a deep freezer in the last 10 years? How many of you bought a washing machine in the last 10 years? How many of you bought a fridge in the last 10 years? Huh? So, then you probably noticed things like this. This is the energy savings level. This is a kind of quality label you put on all electronic devices. And so one of the ultimate goals of the Testomat project is to develop something similar, your test automation maturity level. With quality labels like this, so they can say like, yes, I'm there, or yes, I'm there. So that's the big dream we're working towards. And in the beginning, when I came to Stockholm and talked to Sigrid and Christian, we were hoping that we would get there in 3 years. Being halfway, I'm not really that sure anymore, but I'm here to share where we got so far. This is the inspiration, this is the dream, but it's inspired actually by some other stuff. How many of you know TMMI? How many of you know TPI? How many of you use TMMI? How many of you use TPI? Okay, so one. Which shows also a little bit like, okay, we're working on that, we're basing ourselves on that, but our preliminary results, which we got from talking to the Testomat partners, is that this whole rush towards test automation actually implied that there's lots of expertise on testing kind of lost because people just write unit tests and think they're done with it. And so we need to work on that. There's other inspiration there. There's 3 papers we found when we wrote the project proposal which talk about a test automation improvement model. One of them from a team in Finland, one of them from a team in Brazil, and then one of them from a team here in Ericsson. And so essentially we're basing ourselves on this paper here towards the test automation improvement model, an initial paper which was submitted to some kind of workshop where they explained the vision behind of it. And the key thing about this is that when you actually go back to this TMMI and this TPI, is that what's actually happening is that there's consultants running around with checklists, doing interviews with people and asking them questions, and based on that, you assess this maturity level, which is subjective, which is human interpretation of what's happening. And this depends then on who's asking and who's answering the questions. And what this time model is saying is that when we're discussing test automation, we should not have any human interpretation anymore. We should base ourselves on what's automated. And because it's automated, it's there, we can measure it, and from the measurements say like, okay, you're on that level. So that's the ideal. So it should really be objective and transparent. So that's the levels. And we're talking from level 0, manual, to level 5, autonomous, zero touch. The dream, like Christian was saying, like you just say, I want this to be a safe Geiger counter, a safe room, and then it automatically generates all the tests. So that would be the levels we have. And in between we have names essentially inspired by TPI and so on, initial repeatable efficient self-management. And then we had several workshops between the Testomat project, several consultants involved, and then it showed that it's not so easy to define precisely what these levels are. And so what I'm presenting you now is where we currently are. This may change in the future. But so the idea is that for level 0, you have test cases, automated, but when and what to execute is manual. For level 1 initials, you have some kind of automated test pipeline, but when something fails, there needs to be manual intervention. Repeatable would be where we currently are if you have a continuous integration system in place, and broken builds are tolerated. So that's where you have manual intervention. Next level would be then continuous deployment, some DevOps, which means that fixing the broken builds is still manual. And then level 4, self-managed, selection plus prioritization, which means that you would generate the test still automatically. And then level 5, autonomous. So that's the current way we currently think about it. And what we're having now is we have every 2 weeks telcos to discuss, okay, how we can actually measure this, what are the steps to improve. So that's what we're currently doing in the project. And to give you a bit of a flavor of what we're happening here, level 1, initial. Essentially saying like you have an automated test pipeline in place, but failure is manual. In that sense, you should be able to go to a team and not just ask like, do you have some? No, you should be able to measure things. How many unit tests do you have? How many component tests do you have? How many integration tests and so on? And you just count them. And when you count them, you can say like, okay, they are there. You should also be able to run, just from the test execution system, how many passing and failing tests you have. And based on that, you can say like, okay, you're on that level. Things which are problem indicators, which can show like you should probably do some work to get to the next level, is the time to execute. How long does it all take to execute? And more importantly, the time to fix. Because the time to fix is the biggest indicator that you should do some things more automated. Just a little question here from the practitioners. How many of you distinguish between unit tests and component tests? Okay. Can you give me a little indication on how many unit tests you have and how many component tests you have? Is it about the same? Is it many fewer unit tests, more component tests? Okay. Yeah, so he says that they had 50% more unit tests than component tests. And then next level, system test, integration test, how does that go? More, fewer? Fewer. How many of you know about this flipping the V? Huh? How many of you never heard about flipping the V? Okay, still a few. Huh? So this is one of the advice you find in many books and blogs and papers. Essentially, if you go to test automation, the general wisdom says like, if you used to have manual tests, then people usually focus on the end-to-end acceptance tests. So that's where most of your test cases are. And then fewer on the system test, and then even fewer on the unit test. If you try to automate things, the general advice, the general wisdom is to do as Joachim was stating, and automate as much as possible from the lowest levels. Because then you gain as much as possible, because those you will execute a lot more. So that's the general wisdom. We talked to a few guys, and well, what you see happening is that, contrary to what you were saying, in practice this is not what's happening. What I hear people telling is that they have a Diablo model, or this kind of, I don't know how it's said, this piedestal model, where, so that's the kind of things that we plan. And so be careful when you go towards more test automation, that the advice you find on the web is not always what you see in practice. And so I don't know, I'm an academic, and I don't know what I should believe, the well-documented, well-argued way of doing things, or what people actually do in practice. One of the other things we're also doing in the Testomat project is doing surveys with real people. And so this is something which I invite you to participate in as well. Essentially what happened is that we will have you 2 pages of questions to answer in about 15 minutes. You fill in the survey, and based on that, you will get a result of where you are in the test automation maturity model. We will also compare you with other organizations, and after we ran all these, this whole survey, we will also give feedback to everybody participating, so that people can actually see where they are. So it's not me who's doing it, it's the people in the University of Oulu in Finland who are running all the things, but I'm especially encouraging to do. And to give you a little bit of feedback on that, we already ran a pilot study for this within the Testomat project. And I'm just going to share you a bit of the results. So we had 31 respondents from 23 companies. And as you can see, this is logical. If you, this was only ran within the Testomat project, so we asked all industrial partners and all tool vendors and all consulting partners, and this is what's happening. So you can see, wait, let's see whether, yeah. So most of them software services, we have lots of consultants and tool vendors, and then tools, things, and then here telecom, manufacturing industry. So that's all the real industrial partners. We then asked, okay, what kind of job titles they have, and what you see there is that most of them are test leads, managers, so they're really responsible for some kind of team doing testing, and then lots of developers. So this explains a bit the kind of focus you see coming up in the survey. We asked them what kind of process areas they work on in the test level, and so there you see that test management is the largest one, and then here test design is the second one. So this as well shows you the kind of bias which is a bit into the responses we got so far. And then this then is the most interesting part, if you ask me. What organization units they have. So we asked them, okay, can you give an assessment of the current test automation maturity? And then people started to answer, yeah, but for what do you answer? And so the whole organization, only a test team, a project, or others. And then you can see that, yeah, it's mainly organizational units which are pretty small, so typical agile teams working together, and then a little bit more on here, the whole organization, and then and so essentially what came out is that this, how many test cases are really automated. Well, this varies a lot, but this is then explainable because you can see the wide variety in how people actually answer the questions. But oops, a bit too fast. Most of the test teams succeed in covering quite a lot of doing quite a lot of tests in an automated way. So this is my last and final slide. We Twittered it, we sent emails around, we sent newsletters around. This is the QR code, this is the link. So please fill in the survey to help us actually delivering more than. And based on that, we will compare your results with the results we have. And like that, you can get an assessment of your own test automation maturity. Thank you.
Thank you.